How do you define creativity?
I have no idea what I'm doing, but I know I'm doing it really, really well.
But I was actually thinking about it on the way here. I'm like, me and Junior are both unincorporated Dade
Yeah.
residents. We grew up all our life. So then, like, I was going through your profile, and I'm like, man, there's so many spots that like resonate with me throughout the whole city. But it's kind of because I never had like a claim that I could, a city or a county I could claim in Miami. So I
Yeah.
kind of claimed all of them.
Yeah.
And I grew up like through all those paintings that you've done. So like a lot of the paintings kind of, resonate with me. Like one of them that I love the most probably is Mall of America.
Oh my gosh. I got my driver's license there.
My mom worked at the DMV for like 30
what year?
years.
Maybe you should give me my license.
Yeah, 100%. If you got your license at
amazing.
Mall of America, my mom was working there.
That's incredible.
So I spent a lot of time at that Mall of America with my mom and AMC Theater, like all that stuff.
They had the best small food samples.
Oh yeah.
Like they had, well, I feel like every mall has a Chinese restaurant first, but I remember Mall of America. I just have like sweet memories of that one tasting the best.
No, and what's crazy is I don't know if you've been there lately, but
No, it's been like years.
It's not nice.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh no.
But the restaurants in the food court are like almost basically the same, except for
Wow.
like one or two,
Yeah.
which is crazy. Like you walk in there and it's like a time warp. You're like, whoa, I'm still like in 1996 or something. Like,
Yeah.
it's crazy. So I wanted to ask, like, if, how would you introduce yourself? I know you do a lot of things, but I kind of want to know, like, your perspective, like how you see yourself.
Yeah, that's such a good question. I feel like I think of myself as an illustrator first and then designer. So whenever I introduce myself, I say, hi, I'm Melissa. I'm an illustrator and designer. Like the designer feels supplemental because I think illustration really is my passion, but I work as a designer. So I think that there's always like that association there. But I think I feel most comfortable with illustrator. I feel most excited to say that part first and then designer.
Well, what would you say is your main, like, professionally?
Oh, professionally? Yeah. So I work at Adobe. I'm a senior designer, senior UX designer. And that means that I design apps and websites. So that's like professionally what I do. But then also Westofchester, I illustrate, Miami landmarks and nostalgia.
So how do you kind of like, we were just talking earlier, you started Westofchester, of course, the Instagram in 2020, but you were doing your design job before that at Adobe, or you got that while?
Yeah. So I'm going back. So 2020, I was living actually in New York. I had moved there for a job. And it was, I think, like the winter of 2020. It was peak COVID, right? So everyone was like stuck indoors, and my boyfriend and I were in our tiny apartment, and I was so homesick. And I was like, I should do something to like, I had drawn before, but it was never tied to like a specific project. And that's when I started. Westofchester was like a moment out of homesickness. It grew and evolved. And my day job at that time, I was working for an agency. So it wasn't Adobe yet. I started Adobe in 2021, but I was working at a design agency that I got hired in New York.
So it's interesting. I don't know if it's like a bias thing, but I feel like, and maybe I'm surrounded by it now, but I feel like there's a lot of talented creatives or whatever you want to call it that we moved somewhere at one point. And then it took us, I mean, he went to Chicago. I lived in Vegas.
No
He went to
way.
New York. Robbie was in New York, LA. But I feel like, and as we get older, there's something that's like, man, why am I like, I feel like I should be in Miami, which is like the
Yes.
opposite when you're
When
like,
you're growing up, right? You're like, I need to leave right now.
it's like for some reason we feel like, oh, we have to leave Miami to go do the thing we want to do that's going to make us, legitimate or whatever.
Yeah.
But then once you're there, you're like, almost like, damn, I like wasn't showing love to this amazing city. Like,
Yeah.
like why did I leave? And then I feel like a lot of people have that realization and then come back. And now we're starting to see people that are like proud of living here and doing their art, whatever that is. And kind of like there's a creative community more than ever. I feel.
Yeah.
So you felt like that when you like were living in New York, you just...
Yeah, I think it's so true what you're saying. Like in so many ways, being from Miami shaped who I am. And I think that, like you were mentioning, when you're growing up, so much of it is like, I need to leave, right? Like, no one gets me. I need to find my right spot. And for me, that the idea that was in my head was New York. And so I actually boomeranged 2 times. I went to New York for college, and then I came back to Miami. And then I kind of felt similarly. Like, I was like, I don't know. I was kind of in between places. But then I came back to school here, and I got offered a job at an agency, which brought me back to New York. But I think so much of what you're saying is right. Like, whether I think you appreciate it more when you're not there. And I think that I learned that in 2020, right? Like, when I was isolated from like being outside, from my family, from like places that shape your memories, you really, I don't want to say it's like you're in fight or flight mode, but it really helps like activate the part of you and the identities that you cling on to. And I think for me, I was realizing that Miami, if I went to draw something, I was inclined to draw a Miami building. It wasn't really a New York building. And I had tried, right? I'd drawn so many bagels. I think I'd drawn like the Met, the MoMA, all these places, but it just didn't feel right.
Right.
And I think that it's a part of you. Like, growing up in Miami is really unique and special. And anyone that is from Miami that you'll find anywhere else, like, the first thing they'll tell you is, I'm from Miami.
Yeah, I think we take it for granted sometimes because it's so like normal to us. But when you get out of the city, you're like, wait a minute, this is very unique.
Yeah.
And then that's like part of your paintings. It's like you forget, oh, that place used to exist. Oh, I remember I used to go there. And to us, it's like a normal thing that, oh yeah, like we grew up with that. But to anyone else that never grew up here, it's like, what is that?
100%. And these places, like, they follow you in different parts of your life, right? So it's like, for me, La Vaquita, I remember going there as a kid, but then I also have memories of like, what was it like being a teenager and going there, and then visiting from college and going back home and seeking it as like a comfort place. So it's like, you have different areas of your life that these places kind of meet you at, which is, I thought, the beauty of going back and like paying my respects to these places. Yeah,
and then when you're older, you like take your friends or your partner, or your kid, my daughter, and you're like, man, I used to like do this here.
Yeah, you see it through their eyes.
Yeah, it's crazy. So, and then coming back from COVID, I feel like that like hyper extends your mind because you're back in your home and you're like, man, imagine if I was going through this in New York. Or it like just hits harder when you're like, why am I anywhere else if my family's here, like my culture's here? And I mean, not that there's anything wrong with going out and exploring new things, but I feel like we had to do that to
100 to get where you're at.
But I feel like Miami in itself is like we took it for granted also as a hub of creativity and like entertainment and everything, really. And now you're seeing where people are coming to Miami for these things.
Exactly.
So it's like I want to be a part of where I grew up. Like, I don't want to be somewhere else. So how did you like develop your style during that time that you were in New York and you started doing Westofchester? Yeah.
So I think that my style really evolved. So if I go back to like 2020, I was doing a lot of patterns. And I think that was when I was still trying to find out like what my drawing style is. When I went to UM for grad school, and my like capstone project was something called The Making of Magic City. So it was, unsurprisingly, a project about Miami. And it was like drawing icons. I drew Celia Cruz, Dwayne Wade, all these people that felt, like huge Miami icons. And it was like a historic site, right? Where you talk about who these people are. There's a little bit of like buildings in there. I made like a map that was an interactive map. And I think when I think about 2020, like that approach kind of followed me through, right? Like when I was making patterns, I was making patterns with people. Like, I think I did a few Celia Cruz patterns, some cafecito in there, but that started to feel really constraining. I felt like every drawing that I was doing, it was exhausting to think about, okay, I need 5 elements because I need to make a pattern. Right. And I think I burnt out of that approach really quickly, but I actually started drawing what people might know as Westofchester, like the actual landmarks. I think my first building was Better when I came back home for a visit. And I was feeling burnt out and uninspired by the work that I was doing. Like, I had it up to here with the patterns. And, if you ever need inspiration, drive along Bird Road.
100%.
Yeah. And that was my first one. And immediately when I finished it, I was like, I felt energized. and I put it out there, and people started to respond to it slowly, and it just made me want to keep drawing. I think the first 5 posts were like just driving along Bird Road. So I think I did La Carreta shortly after I did Frankie's. So it kind of grew that way.
Awesome. So how did you kind of learn?
Oh yeah, sure.
Just it's a better. Sorry,
No, all good. How did you learn design? Like, because you said you started with photography, and then you kind of, I mean, not design. You went to school for that, and you ended up getting an internship and a job. But the illustrations,
Yeah.
how did you taught yourself that, or you learned that in school?
Yeah, so I definitely taught myself that. So I have to make a shout out to Southwest.
Shout out the Eagles.
Shout out to Southwest. Did you ever take AP Art by chance?
No.
There was this amazing teacher. I don't know if she's still there. Her name was Miss McCoy. Shout out Shelly McCoy.
Shelly McCoy.
She was amazing, and she taught this AP studio art class, which was really an unstructured way of making art. So her class, everyone would make things from like installations to like mini photo sculptures. That's what I ended up doing. And it wasn't directly illustration, but it was like thinking about putting things together. It was more so like collaging. And I think that when that was really helpful for me as a creative. So I started with that. And then I kind of disregarded the collaginess of it. I kind of stuck to photography because that's what I studied at Parsons. And I took design classes, but I felt that you had to be like classically trained to be an illustrator. It always felt like intimidating to me. So I think just like along the path of being a little bit bored with photography, I started making like photo animations on Photoshop, just like super choppy GIFs using like the timeline feature. It wasn't elegant at all.
Right.
It was just so like rough and ready. But I think that curiosity of like seeing things scale differently and like taking elements out from a photo and almost making like an illustration out of it, right? Like that sparked my curiosity. And then I just started to draw. I think it was really maybe 2016 when I was shifting. I had been a photo editor in New York for like a few years, and I realized that that job wasn't for me. It felt like very administrative and not very creative. So as a way to like connect to my creativity, I started doing things like those photo animations, which led to drawings and then illustrations. But I think things really changed in like 2017. That's when I got my first iPad, or 2018, and I started to draw. And I was like, whoa, there's a whole world out there. I have the power with photography. Like you can build scenes, right? And you can like shoot art. I really like doing documentary photography, but I felt like I didn't really have control of the scene that I wanted to set. So when I was doing illustration, or when I started it, I was like, I can construct a scene. Like I don't have to
From scratch.
From scratch. I can do it on my own. And that part was really exciting for me.
No, and I'm sure like going to school and studying photography, you probably have that notion of maybe, I have to, like you said, I have to go to school for this. I have to learn the correct way, like whatever. But I mean, I'm the same way. I always like taught myself graphic design, but I would always have that like, but these people went to school and they work here and they work that. But it's just like, if you want to do something and the curiosity is like the biggest part, because you just always want to keep learning, like, how do you do that? And how do I do that? So sometimes you could say maybe that's more important than going to school, because maybe you're locked in on going to school, so you just show up and you learn, but
exactly
you don't have that like drive of like, I'm not going to school, so like I really want to learn this, type of thing.
And you don't limit yourself either too. So I think that like when you're in school, art is so subjective,
right?
So it's like it really depends on who your teacher is, right? And if you have a different vision than like your professor, then you're not really going to feel inspired, right? Because this person sees art should be a certain way versus maybe it's not your way of expressing yourself.
100%. And they're teaching, so it's like
Yeah.
They really believe, for better or for worse, that it's like, no, you have to learn it this way. Whereas I can go on YouTube and look at 100 teachers and be like, oh, they did this, and let me take that. This person did that, let me take that. So yeah, YouTube University is.
I was gonna ask, what was your aha moment with like graphic design?
So I learned graphic design out of curiosity as well, but mainly because I was DJing at a young age, and I was seeing like these flyers and this and that, and I was like, I'm not gonna pay someone. I don't have money. I'm like 18 years old.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I enjoy that creative process of like, okay, if I'm gonna put out a mix or my press kit or whatever it is, like I want to be the one. I don't want to be going back and forth with someone because they might not understand. And especially at that time, like you're a DJ, like what do you want me to design? I don't understand. So I just taught myself out of like, oh, I want to be able to put things, not have to wait for something or someone. Like I want to put things out. And yeah, I just taught myself through not really that much YouTube at the time because there wasn't a lot of people teaching on YouTube.
Right.
But the tutorials where you would go read on a forum, then go back to Photoshop, then go next step, then go back to Photoshop. Then, so I feel like that way of learning helped me because I had to read it, see it, and then like, okay, 5 minutes on like just going back to get the step. Whereas YouTube, you're like seeing someone do it, which is very helpful too. But yeah, that was like the aha moment of like, oh, like, yeah, I DJ, but I can create other things.
Yeah.
Especially for myself.
I love that you said that too, because I think so often growing up, I thought that I could only be one thing. So it's like, I identify myself as like, I'm going to be a photographer and that's it. That's the path that's set for life. But it's just like, that's the beauty of evolving and changing and thinking about yourself in different ways.
No, and it's crazy because like at the time I wasn't thinking like that. It was like, oh, this seems practical. I can learn the graphic design that's going to feed my DJing. But it's funny you say that because I thought of it the other way. Like I thought of it the same way where like, no, I could only be a DJ. I don't want anyone to know I graphic design because then they're going to think I'm not as serious as a DJ or whatever else I'm doing. So I was almost like hiding it in a way until I had that realization of like, what do you mean? That's like brings added value. Like, you could do so much more than DJ.
I think starting up in our careers, there's like this idea of constraints that we set upon ourselves. Like people, it's not even so much about what people actually think, but it's like the perceiving what people might think of you and like the bucket that they put you in.
Oh, 100%. There's this great, I forgot the quote, but it's basically like no one cares. No one's thinking about you.
That's the beauty of it.
It's like I forgot the saying, but it's basically like you think that like because you're the main character in your life that everyone's looking at the lens like how you are. But in the reality, no one's ever thinking about you.
They're so focused on themselves. Then that's the beauty of it too. Like you can do anything.
Now, once you realize that it's a lot easier to be like, yeah, I'm going to do this podcast. Yeah, I'm going to do that. Yeah, I'm going to start my own Westofchester Instagram because it's like,
why not?
I want to do it. So who cares? And then you find that people actually do care, and when they're seeing your things, it strikes a chord. But at the end of the day, you do it because you want to do it.
Yeah.
So you said you got a job at Adobe. I want to talk about that because that's like, I mean, like in the design world, that's like the Super Bowl of companies to work for. Like that's prestigious, I would say. How did you get that job, and like were you is that something you were striving for, or just kind of?
Yeah, I would say so. Like, I think it always felt like a dream company, and it still feels like a dream company for me. So leading up to, I went back to grad school, and that's when I really learned about UX design. And I was doing a bunch of internships. I was doing freelance work, anything I could, because I had to build up my portfolio. So I knew that I had like dream companies in mind, and Adobe was always number one. So I would always look at, okay, what are these designers doing? What do their portfolios look like? And in grad school, while working, I also had to do internships and take on a bunch of work because I wanted to graduate with a job. Like there's a practical, I wanted to get money, right? Like we want to get paid. It's important to live. But so I spent a lot of work just like researching what other designers were doing, respected designers that I really admired. And I ended up working at an agency for, I think, 2 years. And that's when I built up like a client portfolio, right? Like a corporate version. And I was always out looking for job postings as well. Like I had subscribed to so many Slack groups. I think there was one like Latinas in tech, designers in UX. And I was just always keeping my eye on job openings because I knew that I didn't really want to work for an agency. I wanted to work for a company, and I wanted to see things. I wanted to see my work, right? I think with an agency, you would only work for a project for like a few months, and then you'd switch off to the next. And I think with a company, I wanted to see like the fruits of my labor. I wanted to see how a design would evolve. I wanted to do some research and see how people react to it. So long story short, after like stalking many of these design job boards, I reached out to someone at Adobe, and I actually applied to Adobe. I think it's super important to mention. I applied like 3 times before I got it. But do not let that deter you.
Right. What's that process like? Like
Yeah.
it's you have to know someone, or you can just go on the website and apply, or
Yeah, so I just applied, right? I think I actually applied to the job I didn't get. It was like a contract job, so it wasn't a full-time job. And I think that I was like, I really want to work here. I'll take a contract job without benefits, and I'll make it work. But I ended up not getting that job. But I connected with the recruiter. They were a really nice person, and they actually said that here's another job I think you might be a fit for. And so I interviewed for it, and I got it.
awesome.
Yeah.
How do you think that's like shaped like your illustration and your creative side, like on your personal work?
Yeah, I think a lot.
Oh, for sure.
So I think at work, there's so much structure, right? When you work for a big company. So I work on the Learn team, and it's the team that creates short form tutorials to teach people how to use things like Illustrator and Photoshop. And I think when you work for a big company, there's so much structure to it, and there's so many layers of approving things. So you have so many different teams that you work with. And I think the way that that's shaped my personal work is that it's driven me to have a lot of curiosity and freedom. So when I think of myself as an illustrator, I'm like, no rules, right? No layers of approval. It's just like me, and it's whatever I want to do, whatever I feel like I want to express myself and make. And I think that kind of seeing my art as an ability to really not have any restrictions, just like whatever my brain wants to create that day, has driven me to make things that are fun. Sometimes they don't work out. Like sometimes I look at it and I'm like, maybe we do need some rules for this. Yeah.
How do you like balance that, I guess, creativity? Because I mean, you are being creative in your job, although it's structured, but then you go home, or you have an idea for a new illustration. Like, how do you not burn out of like using your brain on a creative way on a daily basis?
Yeah, so I definitely do burn out. That definitely does happen.
Right.
But I think it's important to find ways to recharge. And I think there are places in Miami that make me feel inspired often. So have you been to Dahlonega by chance?
No.
Oh my gosh, you would love it.
I have to go.
It's incredible.
That's where one of your books is, right?
Yeah. They sell it there. They're just incredible. It's run by Steve and Lillian. They're married. They're also art directors. And it's just the most inspiring bookstore. And it's now in the Design District. It used to be in Little River. But every Saturday morning, my boyfriend and I have a routine. We like get our iced coffee.
Oh, that sounds nice.
Yeah, and we go to Dahlonega, and we just like look at art books. And they also have exhibitions too. And if I want to be a little closer, I go to Books and Books too. I think that it's like allowing myself the space to recharge. But I think that with my illustration, there is the way to like keep myself recharged is just to like think of things differently. I have like a form that's a suggestion form where it's like I often hear from people, can you illustrate this building? Can you do this? And I made a form out of it. I think that's the corporate in me. I'm like, I need to have a structured list for these recommendations. But it's really helped me whenever I feel like I'm like, I can't really think of what to draw next. I'm like, oh, I have a form where people have submitted ideas. And I often refer to my work as like a communal yearbook. And I don't think of myself as just like the only person doing it. Like the ABCs of Miami, for example, all those places were crowdsourced.
Oh, okay.
So I think when I like alleviate the pressure that I have to come up with all the ideas myself, I'm like, no, people suggest things. This is like our Miami. I'm contributing to the collective memory.
Yeah, and especially that it's Miami, it's like you want that feedback because it's like everything that people grew up with that are, has like a strong emotional tie or whatever the case is. How do you come up with like those illustrations? Like you said, you had a form and, there's places that inspire you, but do you ever, I guess the question is like, are you ever trying to do something that's maybe not Miami related, or you're like, but this is what's working, or I should maybe try to do something different, or how do you kind of?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think that I've definitely tried to, like, reflecting right now, have I done things that are not Miami related? I think I have, and it probably hasn't gone that well.
Right.
But I think that maybe it was last summer or a year and a half ago, I did a lot of illustrations on like sayings. So I was actually in Spain like a year and a half ago, and I did an ojalá. And that wasn't specific to Miami. It's something that is said a lot in Miami, but also is said around the world. And that felt really cool too. I felt like I was able to kind of broaden. But I think what really makes me happy is illustrating Miami. And I think there also are challenges to see, like, I've gotten commissioned works, right, for brands that are not in Miami. And that's always been kind of fun, right? So it's like, how do I inject my personal touch to something that's a little bit separate? But yeah, it's always a fun balance.
But that's cool too, because that's probably why those brands reach out to you in the first place.
Yeah.
So they kind of do want that Miami flavor, which is like, goes back to what I was saying. Like, I feel like even with our work and everything that everyone does, like even in here, sometimes we think like, oh, we're limiting ourselves to Miami because we're all from Miami.
Yeah.
But there's people, like, it's the internet. So people still, even they might not resonate with like the Mall of America or Eckerd's or Burdines.
Can you imagine not resonating with Burdines?
But they see your style and your art, and they're like, oh, but I like that Miami flavor.
Yeah.
Like, can you do that over here with whatever? So I think like that's something that like maybe sometimes we forget. We're like, no, we could stick to what we're doing and then try to apply it and solve a problem in another way somewhere else, but still with our Miami, or what do we say, sazon, like, you know.
Seasoning.
Yeah, exactly, the seasoning.
Yeah.
So like, what's your like work process like when you are gonna sit down and do an illustration, or are you even sitting down? I don't know.
Am I sitting down? I'm at Palacio de los Jugos. I'm above the hot bar. I just have my little sketch pad.
Real Miami.
No, that's a good question. I think oftentimes I draw before or after work. So I think that my perfect day is waking up at like 6 and having like, I'm 2 coffees in.
Wow.
At that point, and I'm just drawing. I think it's also kind of meditative at this process too. Like, it's like before I start work, if I'm able to draw, I feel like I'm setting myself up for a good day.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I think that I try to, I mean, obviously there are days where I'm just like, I have a deadline and I stayed up till midnight. So I don't draw, right? But I think if I set the perfect day for myself, it's also about like creating structure. I think I often fight with that as a creative, like being like, I want to just do this.
Yeah.
And I don't want to create a schedule for it, but it's you're setting yourself up for success when you do that.
No, for sure. No, and I think like I used to be the same way, but having a structure is super important, because then you're able to like, okay, I know I have this time to create this or do whatever I want to do for myself. But then there is some times where you just like, no, I want to do this. Like, it's just, like,
it just happens.
I just have to do it.
Yeah.
And I kind of just blow up my day. I'm like, fuck it, I'll fucking be late with this deadline, or I'm do this tomorrow. But like, I feel like if something's giving you that energy, you have to like do it, because you might not have this like little spark again for it, and you might finish it like in an hour.
Exactly.
Because you're so like hype on it, versus like, all right, I'll do it next Thursday. And then you kind of lose the momentum of it.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's like you strike a balance, right? Some days, like if there's a longer term project that I'm working on, like sometimes I get asked to do commissions, and that's when I really have to like have the structure, because there's a client on the other side. But for myself, I think there's certain days where I just wake up and I'm like, I'm just going to draw. I'm just going to see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, it's just natural in life, you know? So how do you kind of approach social media? So a question I wanted to ask you, because I remember when you first started the profile, it was just your art.
Yeah.
And you kind of start, showing yourself and your personality. But like, how important do you think either your personal brand or social media in general is for your work or your profession?
Yeah. So I think I struggled a little bit with social media. Like, it took me a few years to build up the courage to share my work online. I think I was self-limiting what we're talking about before, right? Like people aren't going to like this. They're going to think it's weird. I'm a photographer and everyone that I grew up with said,
Right.
now I'm drawing things. But I kind of just had the moment where I'm like, who cares? This is what I'm doing and I'm having fun. And it definitely did start off as just my art. But I think that there was a moment there where I was feeling pressure. Anytime I wanted to post, it had to be this completely polished final product. And I thought to myself, like, why? I'm also, there's a person behind this. Like I love seeing artists' creative process, and it's not always a fully baked product that they're showing. Sometimes it's like how they got there or what's in progress. So I think somewhere along the way, I'm still dealing with it, right? Where I'm like learning to let go of showing something that's not fully done and showing a little bit of who I am and how I got there. But yeah, it's a delicate balance. But I think I'm super grateful for social media because it's created visibility for my work, but then also given me the visibility to look at other people and feel inspired.
No, 100%. And it's crazy, like how powerful the mind is, where you think, oh, like, I don't know if people are going to like it, or, you know, everyone's seen me in a certain way and now I'm going to start doing this. But then it's just so funny because then you start posting and then like,
Yeah.
we didn't really know you before, but we see your work and we're like, oh, it's sick. Like, oh, that's so dope. Like, where has this been? How haven't I been following it?
You're just trapped in a studio apartment in Brooklyn.
But you're thinking like just maybe like a set of 10 people in your mind,
Yeah.
you know? But
100%.
But then it's like there's all these people out here that are like, yo, that's sick. Like now I'm inspired. I want to do this. I want to do that. But it's so crazy how like your mind just thinks, nah, but this person that I went to high school with.
It's always a person that you go to high school with. And here I am sitting across from someone I went to high school with
Literally, there you
that I
go.
met through my art. Like there's at the other end of that judgment is like a nice interaction, right?
Look at that. Like literally, like you could flip that mindset into like someone that I went to high school with that I didn't know at the time. Now I know because of my art. Like that's pretty crazy. So who are like other people that maybe inspired you to start showing your art, or other artists that you kind of looked at their work?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So there is this Italian illustrator. Her name is Olympia Zagnoli, and I've been following her work for like 10 years. And I think that even when I was a photographer, I was looking at the stuff that she was making. It's like these beautiful kind of figurative drawings, and they're super bright and colorful. And I guess somewhere in my subconscious, I was like, I need to make art one day. So she's kind of an international artist. But when I think locally, I think of people like Dalazine, for example. They're artists themselves. There's Danny Brito, who's an illustrator, and he puts a lot of who he is and the process of his art in his work and what he shares to social media. And I find that super inspiring to look at someone else's process. There's Gabe Alcala. He's also an illustrator. He does a lot of like editorial work, which I find really great. I think also working editorially is really hard. It's like, how do you inject the flavor of yourself for a client? And I think he does it really well. Yeah, there's so many people.
Yeah, I mean, and now with social media and the internet, it's like you could just every day I find something new and I'm like,
Yeah.
now I gotta follow this person.
Gotta archive it to make my own collection of inspiration.
Literally, and it's not just art or create. I mean, everything on Instagram now is almost creative, but like you just find so many different people in different industries, and you're like, oh, the way it could be a fitness person that I like the workout, but then the way they shot the video, I'm like, oh, that's cool too. Let me like, it's like a never ending.
100%. That's how I feel about like style bloggers.
Yeah.
I love like menswear a lot in particular. Like I love patterns and textiles. So a lot of the inspiration that I save is also a lot of people that are working in fashion.
Yeah.
I think storytelling, I mean, there's so much of a parallel between fashion and art. Like it's so related, but I think the way that what you're saying, like how people tell their stories and use that platform, that's also a source of inspiration for me.
No, and I think fashion, like I'm starting to understand that too. It's like there's so much design in it.
Yes.
And then even like a lot of these fashion bloggers take a picture, but there's so much like it looks like they're just grabbing a coffee.
It's not, because I have tried to recreate myself drinking a coffee and it looks awful.
It's like you think they're just nonchalant, like in the middle of the New York street, but it's like so well, like staged, not so much staged, but like the color of the shirt with the cup of the coffee and the hat's tilted the right way.
Yeah,
and
there's
like,
so many layers to it. Like the color palette that they're wearing, the composition of the photo, like everything feels like a paid actor in the photo.
And some people look at that and they're like, oh, they're trying so hard. But I'm like, yo, that's kind of cool. Like you're just the
Yeah.
picture is the creation. Like you
Yeah.
probably spent like a couple hours that day
100%.
where it could have just been a quick 30-minute coffee, like hanging out. Like, nah, I'm gonna.
No, I personally, it makes me so happy to see other people do things that they like to do.
Yeah.
So whenever I see someone like in the middle of Paris taking a photo of themselves getting a coffee, I'm like, yes, like archive support, because why not?
Yeah, and also reinforces that to yourself, or like, bro, look, this guy's just having a grand old time taking a perfect picture in the middle of Paris. Like,
Yeah, what's stopping me? Let's
like go do whatever dumb thing you want to do, man.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you see, it goes back to your mind. Like you also see the amount of support someone has for what they're doing, but then yet you're looking at yourself and you're like, yeah, but who's gonna like my work? And
Yeah.
it's like, bro, 20,000 people like this guy taking a picture.
Somebody might like your stuff too. It might resonate. There might be an
Yeah.
audience. I think there's an audience for everything.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
And every day I see more and more, like, you know, even when my friends send me like funny videos of someone singing a song, I'm like, yeah, but this guy has like 100,000 likes. Like, he might not be like a world renowned artist or on a record label, but he has a community
Yes.
that supports him. Like, that's already mind blowing that you can have that already. So, like,
Yeah.
I mean, you have like your own community that supports you. Like, that's something you probably would have never thought a couple years ago.
I think that's what's really exciting about what's happening with like maybe it's social media, right? But also art in general, where like we're kind of deviating away from the idea of celebrity and we're becoming more invested in like normal, regular people. And I think that feels super inspiring. Like, I think when I'm supporting a brand, I'd rather support someone who's like starting off from their kitchen and they're making something, right? As opposed to a celebrity. And I think that with social media, we're able to see stories from people, like everyday people we wouldn't otherwise have access to. And to me, I follow this like this blogger who's like 60 and moved from the States to Paris and is just like renovating her home. And like, that's part of my routine to unwind and recharge. Like, I'd just rather hear from regular people. And I think there's a push for that and maybe an appetite for that.
No, 100%. And like, it's super interesting. You said like, not the new celebrity, but it's like people are kind of tired of that. Like, oh, okay, you're a celebrity, you're famous and you have a following. But there's a difference with like a community.
Yeah.
Where it's like super cool now. Like, I tell my wife this all the time. Like, we're walking and like, you might see someone you follow on Instagram for something and they have like 5,000 followers or whatever. But you're like, yo, I love your stuff. Like, you're like
It's the
geeking out.
best.
And then everyone else is like, well, who is that?
You're like, I know. That's all that matters.
Trust me, I know who he is.
Me and the other 5,000 folks.
But you rather have like those 5,000 not loyal, but you know, supporters where if you do
100%.
put something out, they're going to support you. They're going to buy it. They're going to post it, whatever. Versus just having, which in the beginning was like, the more followers you have, the more, I guess, legitimate you were. But that doesn't really mean anything anymore.
It doesn't. Like, I feel super, like, I feel like I have a pretty small community, but I feel super lucky that I can post like an art in progress and be like, what do you guys think? Does this look weird? And then hear from people. I'm like, cool, we built that together. Like, it's the best version of a group project.
Literally. Have you ever had like some hater comments?
Oh, yeah.
Because I think about it, like, also it is Miami.
Right.
So
right.
people feel like
double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely have. And to that, I say, like, I'm an illustration account. I'm not here to fight. Right. They're like, it's not the target audience for me. Like, and it doesn't really happen often, but it does happen sometimes. And, you know, it's important to preserve yourself, exercise a block button whenever you feel like you're not in the right environment for yourself. But I think what's been great is like most of the people have just been super supportive.
No, and also I feel like if you do get a couple hater comments, like sometimes I'll get some on like my podcast clips on TikTok or whatever, but I'm like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Like that means like it's not all positive, and it's nothing crazy. It's just like, oh, I think this is different, whatever. But the fact that someone heard the clip or listened to the podcast and was like, oh, I'm going to tell you my opinion.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, you know,
true.
Something is happening, whether it's good or bad, but it's better than like no one even interacting with it.
Yeah,
it
like, incited a reaction from someone.
Yeah, and it's nothing like hurtful. It's just like they disagree or they don't agree with whatever was said. But I think it's still like, you know, the saying, the cliche is like, you know, if you don't have haters, you're not doing something right. But
Yeah.
it kind of true. Like if no one cares to take the time to comment something, then
That's
you know,
true.
what are you doing? What's like one place in Miami that you wish was still open?
Ooh, I think I'm gonna go Allen's.
Mm.
I remember always it like follows you in different parts of your childhood, right? But I think for me, whenever I would be coming back home from something, like coming from a family member's house or like hang out with my friends, and I would pass Allen's, I'd be like, I'm on the way home. This is like my marker for being almost there. And then also just like I really miss diners. Like
yeah, man.
I think we still have like Jimmy's Diner, and low key like Denny's is still a diner.
Yeah.
Did you ever use those claw machines in the front?
Oh yeah, all day. Spent hundreds of dollars.
Spent hundreds still in debt from that. No,
It's
that
like
claw
literally,
machine.
but it's funny. Like we were saying, different time periods. Like first it was as a kid bothering
Yeah.
my parents. Then it's like after high school gatherings, whatever,
Yeah, yeah.
Southwest right there going,
Yeah.
prom, whatever. Then it's like 3 a.m. Like
I know, moons over
26,
Miami.
wasted like 100. I'm gonna get this for you. So it's like different stages of like those places that you're like, yeah, I was there trying to get that. Yeah.
I love a diner. Like the idea of just sitting at a place and just hanging out with your friends. And I think with like restaurants, it's like, all right, you have to keep going. There's
Yeah.
someone there that needs your table. But with like things like Allen's, always packed, right? Or even like a Denny's, like just the idea of sitting there and taking up space and having a good time. And that space is like also a paid actor in your core memories.
Yeah. It's that's like the one thing, not the one thing, but one of the things I love most about New York.
Yeah.
It's like a diner on every corner.
Same.
And you just like hang out and get like a sandwich that's like all right. But it's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
who cares? Like
Diner coffee is the best. It's also like not that great, but
Yeah.
it's the best in the process of it.
and I love that you just have like 100 things you could get on
Yeah.
the diner. And they just say, yeah, I can fix it up. Yeah, Miami doesn't really have something like that. And then the diners they do have are very like not that type of like $5 sandwich. Like
Yeah, it's like a $13 artisanal
Yeah.
toast.
It's very bougie. Like
Yeah.
I mean, but I don't think a diner would really survive like a New York style diner here. It's just not practical, I guess.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'd like to leave everyone with this last question, but I'll ask you, what does creativity mean to you?
Ooh, I like that question. I think creativity means self exploration, right? And like it's also a way to I feel like I identify a lot of who I am through my creativity. So there's like a lot of self-identity in it that's reflected. I think the curiosity really pushes you to ask questions. I think if I thought of myself through my creative journey in my life, like I probably would always be like, oh, I think I'm a creative person. But I think the idea of how that evolves over time is really interesting. And a lot of that is due to like curiosity and learning new things. So like the drive to become a photographer, to illustrator, to designer, to keep asking questions. I think ultimately creativity just feels like a playground for curiosity.
A playground for curiosity. That's a new shirt, I think.
Is it? Should we design it now?
Hey, that's what it's about right there. Well, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
If you want to plug your Instagram, I mean, everyone knows it's Westofchester, but if there's anything else, and the book, I really want people to
Yes.
check out the book too.
Yeah, check out the ABCs of Miami. You can currently find it at Books and Books, Dalazine, I think the Perez Art Museum. Yeah, thank you so much.
Of course, thank you. We'll definitely put a link to the book and all that too.